Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really practical subject, something I think many of us encounter in different ways, feelings of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, and our guide for this exploration is a really interesting resource. Excerpts from Beating Depression, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Patient Workbook Prism.
Right. So think of this as getting like the essential toolkit for understanding some key strategies for navigating these challenges.
Exactly. And what's really compelling about this workbook is how it's directly tied to the therapy process itself. It's designed, as a companion to sessions.
Often done over the phone, right, which is convenient.
Yeah, typically around 45, 50 minutes a week, maybe over a few months. But the crucial thing it emphasizes is that therapy isn't passive.
Mm-hmm.
It needs active involvement. There are exercises between sessions, and you really work with a therapist on what to focus on.
Yeah, it's about actively building skills. And the workbook, it lays out some clear expectations too, doesn't it?
It does. Things like giving notice if you have to cancel.
At least 24 hours, yeah.
Right. And making sure you're in a quiet, private place for the session.
Definitely not while driving.
Definitely not. So our mission today is really to dig into the core ideas behind cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, as it's introduced here.
We want to unpack how CBT shows the powerful ways our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all linked up.
And more importantly, how understanding those links can actually lead to, well, positive changes for you.
Okay, so the core of CBT, the workbook breaks it down.
Yeah, it makes it really clear. It focuses on these three connected parts.
Mm.
Your thoughts, that inner voice, the ideas you have,
Mm-hmm.
then your emotions or feelings.
Right.
And finally, your behaviors, what you actually do or maybe what you avoid doing.
And CBT gives you skills related to these.
Exactly. Concrete skills like identifying and boosting your existing coping mechanisms for stress,
Okay.
finding ways to improve your mood through positive activities, becoming aware of those like unhelpful patterns.
The ones that can trap you.
Yeah. And learning new ways to respond to negative thoughts and feelings so they don't just, snowball.
Right, so they don't spiral into deeper depression or anxiety. Okay, let's make this more concrete. The workbook has a simple example, right, about a thought.
It does. It's a really good one. Imagine you think, this program can't help me.
Okay, a common kind of hopeless thought, maybe.
Right. And the CBT approach isn't just to accept it. It encourages you to, well, question it.
How so?
It points out this key idea. Just because you think a thought doesn't mean it is true.
Ah, that's powerful, just because you think it.
Doesn't make it fact.
Yeah.
Exactly. So instead, it suggests a more balanced thought like, I don't know, but I will give it a try.
That shift from "it can't" to "I'll try" feels significant. It's moving from assumption to, like, investigation.
Precisely. It captures that active, questioning part of CBT,
Yeah.
recognizing thoughts or interpretations.
Okay. And to really see this in action, there's that detailed example. The story about John and his friend Steve.
Yes, that really illustrates the whole model. So the situation was John had agreed to help Steve build some bookshelves.
Okay.
But, as it got closer, he started making excuses. He felt obligated, but he just wasn't feeling sociable, didn't really want to do it.
We've all been there, I think.
Totally. Then after a really long, tiring day at work, he just couldn't face going over there.
But he didn't cancel either.
No, he felt too awkward, too embarrassed to cancel last minute. So he just stayed home, watched TV instead, avoided the whole thing.
Okay, so classic avoidance. What was going on in his head then? What thoughts?
Well, according to the workbook, his thoughts turned pretty negative, pretty self-critical. Things like, Steve must think I'm a total loser.
Ooh.
Yeah. And maybe I am. I can't even do what I say I will do. How can I ever face Steve?
Wow, that escalated quickly.
It really did. And those thoughts just ramped up his anxiety, his guilt, his frustration. He went from maybe just feeling a bit reluctant to feeling actively guilty, anxious, and depressed because he didn't show up or call.
It shows how thoughts can really pour fuel on the fire of emotions.
Absolutely. And those amplified feelings then directly influenced his behavior.
Which was?
More avoidance. He started actively dodging Steve, screening his calls, not answering the phone.
Just digging the hole deeper.
Exactly. It's that urge to escape the uncomfortable feeling, but it backfires.
It sounds like he got completely stuck in a loop.
That's exactly what the workbook calls it, a cycle. The avoidance made his negative feelings worse, made him worry more about Steve's reaction.
Which made it even harder to face him.
Right. So more avoidance, deeper negative feelings, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, all feeding into each other.
And there's a diagram in the workbook, figure 2, that shows this visually. Does seeing it laid out help?
Yeah, diagrams like that can be super helpful. It just maps it out clearly. The situation triggers unhelpful thoughts.
Like Steve's gonna be mad.
Right. Which leads to negative emotions, anxiety, guilt, which leads to the behavior avoidance.
And the arrow goes back around.
Yep, showing how the avoidance feeds back, reinforcing the negative thoughts and feelings, keeps the cycle spinning. It also notes, interestingly, that similar loops can happen with positive emotions too, though the results are usually quite different.
That's an interesting point. But back to John's negative spiral. Did the workbook suggest how he could have handled it differently, like alternative thoughts?
Oh, absolutely, that's key.
Yeah.
Instead of beating himself up, he could have thought something like, wow, I'm really too tired to work with Steve tonight. I had a long day at work. Just acknowledging it.
Okay, less judgment there.
Right? Or maybe a problem-solving thought like, okay, I can't do it all. Maybe I can help Steve for just an hour tonight and we can finish it this weekend.
Ah, so breaking it down.
Yeah. These thoughts open up different behavioral options. Talking to Steve,
Yeah.
negotiating, instead of shutting down and avoiding, it prevents that whole downward spiral.
That makes a lot of sense. But okay, that's John. How does the workbook help you, the listener, apply this to your own life?
Well, that's where the practical exercises come in. It directly asks you to think about a recent negative experience you had.
Something that made you feel stressed or down.
Exactly. And then it guides you. What thoughts went through your head? What emotions did you feel? What did you do?
So you basically fill in your own model, like John's.
Precisely. You create your own personal cognitive behavioral map for that situation. It's that direct application that helps you start seeing these patterns in your own life.
So it's very hands-on, not just theory. Now, the name cognitive behavioral therapy clearly points to two things: cognitive and behavioral. How does the workbook link those?
It really stresses that both are equally important. The cognitive is your thinking, your interpretations. The behavioral is what you do, your actions.
And they influence each other.
Constantly. It's a two-way street. Thoughts drive actions. Actions shape thoughts and feelings. Understanding that dynamic interplay is fundamental to CBT.
And this interplay is really clear when the workbook discusses the downward spiral of depression. That phrase really resonates. How's it explained?
It paints a picture many can relate to. Feeling low often leads to doing less, right?
Yeah.
You withdraw, maybe let things slide, less engagement.
Right. But doing less often makes you feel worse, which then makes you want to do even less.
Ah, the feedback loop again.
Exactly. It's that self-perpetuating tailspin where feeling bad leads to inaction, which leads to feeling worse. It just reinforces itself, making it hard to break out.
So if that's the spiral down, how does CBT propose to, well, reverse it?
The main goal is to interrupt that cycle. Therapy helps you identify the specific thoughts and behaviors that are keeping you stuck.
Okay.
And then, crucially, it teaches you practical techniques to start a reverse tailspin.
An upward spiral.
Kind of, yeah. By making small, conscious changes in behavior even when you don't feel like it, and by challenging those negative thoughts.
You can start to feel a little better.
Exactly. And feeling a bit better can give you the energy to do a bit more, which helps you feel even better. It's about building positive momentum. Building positive momentum. I like that. Now, what about someone listening who's thinking, okay, sounds logical, but will it work for me? Does the workbook address skepticism?
It does, yeah. It acknowledges those doubts directly. It points to the research, and there's a lot of it, showing CBT is effective for a wide range of issues, from mild to quite serious.
So it has a track record.
A strong one. It reassures you that as you get comfortable with the skills, with your therapist's support, you can learn to change those patterns. It's about learning tools and building confidence.
That emphasis on learning and having tools seems important. The workbook also talks about what you bring to therapy, your expectations, your questions. Why is that so critical?
It really highlights that your initial mindset matters a lot. What do you hope to get out of this? What are your questions? It encourages reflection on that. And then setting specific goals with your therapist early on, that's presented as vital.
Goals for what specifically?
For tackling the problems you're facing, improving your mood, learning better coping skills. It gives the therapy direction. And progress towards these goals is reviewed regularly.
So it's a collaboration with a plan. And the weekly sessions themselves, they have a structure too. What's a typical session like?
Yes, there's usually an agenda for each session. It helps break down the bigger goals into smaller steps.
Manageable chunks.
Right. And often, the therapist will start by asking, okay, what specific problem or issue would you like to focus on today?
So you have input into the session's focus.
Absolutely. It keeps it relevant and makes sure you're an active participant.
And the workbook itself, how does that fit into the sessions? Do you bring it along?
Yes, you're expected to bring it. It's your space for taking notes during the session, capturing insights.
Uh-huh. Moments, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also for jotting down thoughts or experiences during the week between sessions. That can then become material for the next discussion. It's an active tool.
It really sounds like the work extends beyond the 50-minute hour. What about these task assignments or homework? What's the idea there?
That scene is really crucial. Practicing the skills you learn in your actual life is how they stick.
Makes sense.
Your therapist works with you to figure out assignments that are realistic things you have the time and energy for. They're meant to help you apply the concepts and track how it's going.
But what if you struggle with the homework? If you just can't get it done, is that bad?
The workbook stresses that it's really important to tell your therapist if you're having trouble.
Don't just avoid it like John avoided Steve.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Avoiding it can slow things down. The therapist isn't there to judge. They're there to help figure out why it's difficult. Maybe the instructions weren't clear, or the goal needs adjusting, or you need help planning when to do it.
So it's part of the process, figuring out the homework challenges too.
Right. It's collaborative problem solving, not a test you pass or fail.
That's a helpful way to frame it. Lastly, then, what can someone expect from their therapist in this CBT process? What's their role defined as in the workbook?
Well, you can expect them to listen carefully, first off, to help you really pinpoint the problems and the patterns involved.
Okay.
They'll teach you new skills, suggest relevant tasks, regularly check in on how you're doing toward your goals, and give you feedback.
Sort of like a coach or guide
Yeah, guide and facilitator. They'll also check your mood regularly.
to see how things are working.
Right. You'll probably use worksheets for that between sessions, too. And they'll summarize things during and at the end of sessions, make sure you've noted down key ideas and the homework.
Clarity and follow-through seem key.
Definitely.
Okay, so wrapping up this first dive into the CBT workbook, what are the main things our listeners should really take away from this?
Well, we've really just scratched the surface of the foundations here, but you should have a clearer idea of that core CBT model, the constant dance between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
And how important it is to spot those unhelpful thought patterns.
Exactly. And to start questioning them. John's story was a good illustration of how that cycle works in real life, both the negative spiral and the potential for shifting it.
And for you, listening, especially if you like to understand things quickly and thoroughly, this gives you a kind of structure, right? A framework for understanding your own mind and emotions.
Mm-hmm. And recognizing that tailspin idea,
Yeah.
but also the possibility of reversing it,
Yeah.
that can offer a real sense of hope and control, I think.
Yeah, agency. And the focus on practical exercises and goals shows it's an active thing you do, not just something you talk about.
And some of those specific ideas are quite powerful, aren't they? Like, just because you think it doesn't make it true.
That one really stands out.
Yeah. And seeing John's experience broken down, maybe with that visual diagram in mind, it can spark those aha moments. And the whole idea of reversing a negative spiral by changing thoughts and actions, that's a pretty empowering.
Hopefully this has sparked some interest. We've really only covered the introduction. There's much more in later chapters about how to identify and change specific thoughts.
Right, the actual techniques.
So what resonated most with you from this overview? Are you curious about applying this model yourself? What do you think about therapy, homework? Lots to consider.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Start paying attention to those automatic thoughts that just pop into your head during the day.
The ones you might not even notice usually.
Yeah. How might understanding the link between those thoughts and how you feel and what you do, how might that give you a new perspective on challenges you're facing? The power to just observe and maybe gently reshape that internal chatter could be closer than you think.